ВДНХ. In fact, it will be a two days long conference, which we invite you all to attend. And thanks again for coming. We are three co-organizers here, and these co-organizers, in their turn, they represent groups. So Oleg Jуравлев on my left is part of a self-organized research group, collective for research in politicization. He will tell about their recent transformations too. Then there is Elena Belokurova. Please, could you come to the stage? Well, it's up to you. And she represents our European Studies Center, and I represent the department. And in my own person, I represent the professorship on democratic theory, which actually sponsored most of the conference, along with the generous committee for academic planning, also represented here by the Vice Rector Boris Kolonitsky. Thank you, Boris Kolonitsky. And now we will say a few words to explain the concept of the conference. And I know Oleg has something to say, then Elena, then I will say a little more words probably than the others for introduction, and then we will immediately pass to the first panel. Oleg.
I represent, I don't know,
probably we do for the video.
Yes. I represent Public Sociology Laboratory, the independent research group which consists of several young researchers, and it's very important that we finally organize this conference because a huge protest movement emerged in Russia 3 years ago, and so we need to study it. And I think it's very important that we managed to invite very good researchers who are from social movement studies family, because the very language, the very approach of social movement studies is not very well introduced in Russia. And Donatella Della Porta and Bert Klandermans, well-known researchers, are here with us and will show us how it's working. And our group is an independent research group, and we consider ourselves a social movement also, because we try to bridge high quality scientific research and also activism, and we invite all students, researchers who are interested in studying protest social movements to join us, to communicate with us, and we will be presenting several reports during the conference. Yes, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Oleg. Elena? Ты даже без стула.
Good afternoon. I'm really happy to be a co-organizer of this conference. I'm representing here the Center for European Studies, European Union Center, here at the European University of St. Petersburg, which is working for research and education in field of the European studies mostly, and we have this opportunity now to organize different events because we have a grant from the delegation of the European Union to Russia since 2010, and actually as we have started to work on this grant, we have invited different scholars and professors studying European Union governance and politics and so on, which was interesting for us, but we could see that it is not so much interesting for our students, because actually they are mostly interested in the studies of Russian politics and society, And so that's why we could see that problem. And we have decided that actually our best strategy could be to include our European interests into the Russian discussions. So that's why actually I think now we have selected really a very good strategy, because actually if you and so many students here in the university are interested in studies of social movements in Russia, then we can actually from our point of view to bring some kind of and to help to bring the European perspective into that research, and not just European but also comparative perspective. So that's why I am really very glad to participate here, because I see how much interest is available in that topic, and so that's why I think it's very important to include our Russian situation, our Russian phenomena into the broader comparative perspective. So that's why we are doing that. And from my personal view, I'm very much interested in the NGOs, so who are maybe not so much involved into the nowadays social movements and social protesting, but who are very much influenced by that. Actually, maybe even more than they would like to be influenced. So that's why actually I'm really very glad that actually also this perspective of NGOs, of small civic initiatives who are not only protesting but trying to solve some social problems in the society, and who would like to propose some new decisions, new solutions for different problems, that they are also in the framework of this conference. And I'm really happy that we don't speak only about protests but also about the consequences and about the initiatives of how to do the society's life better. So that's why I'm really happy also to participate in this conference, and I will also speaking here tomorrow in the very end of the day. So then I will say more about my impression of the conference. But now I wish you all good luck for our work and for very interesting debates. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elena. And as promised, I will also say a few words on the substance. And as Elena already started to say, the focus of the conference is revolutions and social movements. But the framework is larger, and it's very important for us, also for the reasons of social and political actuality, because the social movements happen not in the vacuum, but in a certain larger structure, and they run and collide into some more passive and inert social forces whose values may be different from or even opposite to those of the protesters. That's what we witness. So the resulting trends of socio-political development are determined not just by the movements, but by what Gramsci calls the trenches of civil society, which don't move or don't move easily. Also, civil society, which is commonly understood as a value value of grassroots social activity and of self-organization. In fact, it constitutes a normative and ideological framework for the analysis of the social movements, which is not easy to be done with. And this framework is surprisingly shared by the most diverse political and social forces. The international charity foundations, which have been active in Russia throughout the last 20 years, such as Soros, MacArthur, Ford, Carnegie, those that support keep supporting in part this university too, they have the development of civil society as their top priority, since they see it as a way of slow but sure democratization and as a way of grassroots support for the eventual political democracy. The international left, on its part, traditionally emphasizes the need for the non-statist self-organization, increasingly in Western Europe and US, where it rarely sets revolutionary goals. So things like social forums, or even the recently fashionable multitudes invented by the Italian theorists, as a recent text by Caspar Davidson and Mitchell Dean nicely said, multitude is a civil society of steroids. So the left, which invents its own concept, still works in the same framework. But the Russian authoritarian leaders surprisingly also give a lot of attention to civil society in their discourse and to a degree even in practice. The reason for this is that in the aspect of the neoliberal reforms that they are leading, there is a need to transfer responsibility to self-organized communities. For the infrastructure repairs, the responsibility is shifted to the tenants' unions. For the moral and clerical censorship, they transfer it to the insulted groups of believers. And for political opposition, they transfer the conflicts to municipalities. This is the last recent strategy. The opposition should only be present at the municipal level. So, being repressive with regard to the NGOs that Elena mentioned, actually, at the same time, Kremlin is active in building and supporting some other types of social initiatives, particularly the so-called GOMOs, right, the government-organized non-governmental organizations. And actually, when Putin restricted the elections to Duma in the years 2000, he immediately created, to balance this, a civic chamber meant to support civil initiatives from state funds. So it's quite a unique institution. So the civil society is everywhere. And this makes it even more interesting to study because it's so rich with actually quite contradictory meanings. Everyone is now for a vibrant civil society. Neoliberal reformers outsource services and build social capital. Political liberals build the ground for democracy and for a cosmopolitan integration, such as global civil society, as Mary Kelvin calls it. The opposition forces in a contentious environment need to institutionalize themselves before claiming power. So they also need a vibrant civil society. But the reality is that the proliferation of social initiatives is met with the ongoing atomization and political apathy, not just in Russia where this is prevalent, but also in the Western countries. As a result, and we will talk about this, many of the social and political movements taken over to the populist or catch-all approach. And here, as a theorist, I think we would gain from looking at the logic, at the historical logic that is compressed in the concept of civil society. This story was long, but I have 5 minutes, and I will, in these 5 minutes, it's enough time to briefly delineate the 4 big steps of this history, which are, I think, crucial. Actually, Hegel, who introduced the notion of civil society in the 1820s, defined it as a set of egotistic and atomized individuals engaged in the market economy. He called it a state of need and understanding. So these people, if they unite only on the basis of mutual egotistic self-interest. So the original meaning of the concept was more or less opposite to the one in which it is used today, which is very common with historical concepts, such as with the revolution, it's the same thing. It used to mean circular movement, and now it's the irreversible breakthrough. So the same with civil society. It used to mean the breakdown of society. It used to mean the fragmentation and enemy that reigns in the market-driven capitalist civil society. And for Hegel, of course, the only solution to this permanent crisis is the state. The second moment in the development of the concept was, of course, Marx, for whom the atomization of civil society was the result of an unaccomplished revolution. So it was a revolution in action, but not completed. Therefore, it led to this pure negativity of civil society. But also, for him, civil society, in its equality and atomization, was an epiphenomenon of the structural split, of the structures of exploitation and oppression, of inequality that reigned in the civil society, in fact. Of course, for Marx, civil society was important because it constituted the material truth of the liberal democratic state. It is civil society, not the state, that one must research and revolutionize. This is the main Marxist thesis with regard to civil society. It is the civil society that matters. But he did not contest the idea that the civil society was the pure negativity. The third moment, again, and of course it's not empirically accurate, but the third important moment was the series of revolutions in Europe after the First World War, which stumbled famously in everywhere except Russia. And therefore, Antonio Gramsci used this Marxist concept of civil society to emphasize the need of conquering the inert forces of civil society, the trenches of it, which were opposed to what we call social movements, before taking over the political power. So here, like in Marx, civil society is understood both as a material truth of the states. We have to go to the civil society, not to the state, and also as a condition of exploitation and oppression. Civil society for Gramsci is not something nice, it's something that blocks your social movements. But what is added is the dynamic sense of blockage. Civil society is the locus of a stumble movement. And on the other hand, it's a moment that precedes a further step forward. In this very rough exposition, the fourth moment was the Eastern European anti-communist movements of the 70s and 80s, which abstained from direct political intervention for the reason of the presence of an overpowerful external actor, the Soviet Union. And therefore, the discourse of civil society was revived there. They developed in the 70s and 80s the oppositional structures in the informal civic and professional associations. They did not go directly to contest the state because they knew it was desperate. That's why they talked about civil society in a strict Gramscian sense. It is from this moment from the later moment when the Eastern European civil society actually proved victorious in the political sense that we start to associate civil society with something nice and with the grassroots solidarity structures. So it's solidarity without the state or before the state, and the public sphere without a republic. It's something that stops before and on the verge of becoming political or becoming the state. And therefore, I think that all these four moments are compressed in the current meaning of the concept. When we say civil society, we unconsciously or consciously mean the fragmentation and the cynical anomia of society. And look at our own society for that, but this is what civil society always is. This cynical anomia, of course, has to do with capitalism, and capitalism is the forced depoliticization of the social economic relations. This is Marx's definition of capitalism. When the state withdraws from economy, then you have capitalism, and therefore you also have fragmentation and the cynical anomia, etc. Then, civil society, of course, means the need and the potential of this fragmented society to come back together, either in the direction of the state or under the state's direct pressure. Then, thirdly, this concept encompasses a sad failure of a utopian or a revolutionary thrust, the impossibility to democratize the state, be it a democratic state or an authoritarian state. And finally, it is the need to entrench oneself in the status quo, in a direct opposition or in autonomy from the government. Therefore, when we study social movements as parts of civil society or a society to court, we have the built-in a priori tensions and conflicts which I think will be present in many of the empirical talks and discussions. First, the social movement either limits itself in the face of a potential takeover of power or partakes in a revolution and then loses its spontaneous character and leads to fragmentation and a dissolution of society. This is the first one. And the second one is that when we go to the civil society, we always look at the privatized individuals. There is always a background of revolutionary dissolution of social ties, which makes all movements and organizations into the powers of the powerless, as Havel called them, or better, the politics of the apolitical, as our group is going to call its collective monument. Because this is really the substance of what's going on in Russia, the politics of the apolitical, but it is always true of any civil society because it is built into the concept. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.